Are we already above your year-end target still?
No, the year-end target, 4,300 for the S&P 500, so roughly 10% up from here. Largely, that'll be driven by earnings. I think the way to think about it is where were the level of sales and profits in 2019 before the pandemic, and where are you likely to be for earnings and sales this year. And what's interesting, we're pretty much through the fourth quarter results, and actually sales and earnings are basically back to where they were in the fourth quarter of 2019. So, Carl, it's basically we've completed the V back to the current level where we were at the beginning of the end of last year or the end of 2019. And looking forward, earnings likely to be a lot higher. Semiconductors, if you look at hardware companies, pharmaceuticals, it's not just the big 5 or 6 or 7 large market cap companies. It's a lot of other companies that are actually going to have much higher level of profits than they did 2 years ago. And I think that's the way to think about it, Carl, is basically what kind of profits did companies generate in 2019? What are they likely to generate this year? And a lot of companies can be much higher than they were 2 years ago. And I think that's the right way to think about it. And that's what takes the equity market higher. And remember, the interest rate environment much more favorable given the starting point in rates right now, 115 or so on the 10 years.
I was going to ask you about potential boogeymen and whether or not interest rate risk appears anywhere. I mean, on the one hand, people can't take their eyes off commodities, but then core CPI comes in with a big zero.
Right. So what are the risks? You got the risk of whether you have COVID. Let's start the obvious, but it's the pandemic that has caused all the problems in so many ways, and tragically, so many people died. But basically, the idea and our assumption is you get a vaccination that's very much rolling out, and by the middle of the year, a good portion of America will have been vaccinated. So we think that's a positive scenario. So that's a risk if that doesn't materialize, or you have a second variant or third variant that comes along. So that's one big issue. Rates, as you just mentioned, definitely an issue. Our forecast, my colleagues in economics, have 150 on the 10-year Treasury yield at the end of this year. So you have some modest increase, but I emphasize that is modest over time. It's not going to leaping higher on a real swift basis. We think that's going to move generally higher. But again, profits are also growing. That would be an issue. The prospect potentially of higher tax rates in 2022 definitely would begin to be an issue or risk later in this year. Don't think it's a near-term risk, but that's something we keep our eye on. Think about that, legislative side of it. So those are sort of the couple of key issues that we would, identify as some risks.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.